So we introduced the section, Start with Heart, by reading a quote from one of our authors, Ron McMillan. And Ron tells us that the outcome or the success of our crucial conversation has less to do with really our level of skill and more to do with the intention or the motive into which we enter into the crucial conversation. So it's important that you understand what we mean by motives. I'd like you to think about motives as a choice that you have as you enter the crucial conversation, as you plan on the crucial conversation, as you're working on yourself first. And we have two sets or categories for how we define or describe our motives. We have what we refer to as our unhealthy motives, and then we have our motives or our goals of dialogue. So let's talk about the difference in the two of these. An unhealthy motive, which I often refer to as an unproductive motive. What do we really produce when we're focused on, I really want to be right? So when we have an unhealthy or an unproductive motive, we're more set on wanting to make sure that we're right, which makes the other person wrong. We get things our way, which means we don't get to do things other people's way. We maybe want to avoid a conflict or blame or punish the other person. Now, why do you think I refer to these as unproductive? Yeah. I imagine this at the end of the day. You've just come home from a busy day at work and you're sitting down to have a dinner and your dinner partner says, so how was your day? What'd you do today? Well, let me tell you, I was right 3 times, I blamed 2 people, and I avoided 2 conflicts. How much did you really produce during that day? So I'd like you to think of these as unproductive motives. Now, on the other side, we have a choice to choose to have a motive of dialogue, which, as you might guess, I'm going to refer to as being a more productive goal. And that's where we can look at the situation and we can spend our time trying to learn why the other person sees this differently. What is it that they know that we may not know? What experience have they had that we may not be aware of? Maybe we want to focus particularly on producing results or strengthening the relationship. If you recall the last video we saw in Get Unstuck, we saw Michelle and Bruce end with a very productive dialogue. And at the end of that video conversation, they were able to have produced results. They were able to talk about and resolve their impossible task. And they were also able to plant some seeds for strengthening their relationship. If you remember, they made an agreement about future expectations. In the future, they would both stick to the plan. And this is what it looks like when we're able to choose a more healthy motive. Now, you see a question up here, and I think you can read for yourself, but what difference do you see between these 2 columns or these 2 sets of motives? What's the difference?
More inclusive.
Yeah, more inclusive. Right. If you'd write down in your toolkit the following words, under unhealthy motives, write the word me. These are me motives. It's all about me. Under motives of dialogue, write the word we down. This is all about we, or it's all about us. Now, a few years back, I had just finished teaching a crucial conversation class when a young woman, Debbie, came up, and she told me that she really enjoyed the class. She learned a lot, and she thought that she would use many of the skills that she learned. But then she went on to tell me that, you know that thing about motives, though? I've got a situation with a woman where I will never be able to come up with what you call a healthy or a productive motive. She then went on to share a situation. She was rather new in the organization, had been there just a short time, and was also a newly promoted supervisor. Now, the reason that she was able to have that supervisor position is that the position was vacated because the previous supervisor, Mary, had been demoted. Mary now reported to Debbie. Mary had years and years and years of experience in this organization. She was a subject matter expert, and she was now reporting to Debbie, who was this young, less experienced supervisor. And Mary didn't like it. And she demonstrated her unhappiness in several ways. It wasn't uncommon for Mary to enter into Debbie's office, raise her voice, and even begin to yell at her. Sometimes she would even yell at her in public places. If Debbie were to approach Mary and ask her a question or delegate some kind of work, Mary would often not even acknowledge that she was there. Now, to make matters worse, Debbie went to her manager to ask for his advice, and he said, I hired you to handle these kind of problems. So when Debbie described her situation, she said, as much as I think about it, I can't imagine a healthier, productive motive with this woman. So I took a moment and I asked her, I said, Debbie, if you could have this first conversation with Mary, and you could create the ideal outcome for this conversation, what would you want that to be? She says, that's easy. I just want her to admit that she has a problem and she needs help. Then I said, well, let me just reverse this a second. If that was Mary's motive about you, how would you feel in terms of that conversation? Well, I wouldn't like it. I wouldn't like it one bit. She needs to understand the problem she's causing for me, how all these changes are affecting me. And as she began to talk, I noticed that she slowed down a little bit, kind of her voice got a little bit more quiet. She kind of stepped back and she smiled and she says, okay, I think I get what you're talking about. So I said, so let's talk about applying that skill that we learned for how we create a healthy motive. So let's start with the first question. When you go into the conversation, what is it you'd like for yourself? Well, that's easy. I'd like to be able to work with her. I'd like to be able to go to her and ask questions, get information. I'd like her to treat me with respect. I'd like to be able to get my job done. That sounds good. What would you like for Mary? Well, I wish Mary would just be happy. I wish Mary could feel like we appreciate her and that she has something she can contribute and that she needs to just kind of get over things. What would you like for your relationship? I wish we could just get along and be respectful. So I said, how does that sound as a productive motive? About 3 weeks after that conversation, I was sitting at my computer working when an email came in. And I'd like to share this email with you. Thank you for coaching me prior to my crucial conversation. It took place a week or so after it was initially scheduled, but went really well. I stayed calm and was able to focus on what I really wanted for myself, for Mary, and the relationship. We were able to reach a workable set of guidelines by recognizing that we both wanted respect. Even my counseling suggestion to her was well received because the conversation was very safe. I was delighted with the outcome. Since the conversation, we have worked well together. I am not expecting complete bliss, but one of the most fundamental items that we agreed to is that neither of us was trying to insult or hurt the other person. We both agreed to step back if we get defensive and think about this basic point. All in all, it's a good start. I hope you choose your motives well.